Now in this video, I want to talk about another really important feature in Photoshop that all designers should be aware of, and that is blend modes. Now blend modes are a way of blending pixels with other pixels to get various types of effects. Now blend modes are in fact all over the program. You can find them in the layers panel, you can find them in the brush tool and layer styles. There's different ways to utilize blend modes. And what we're going to concentrate mainly in this video is how they work inside of the layers panel. So just to show you a few examples and just give you an idea of what you can really do with blend modes, there are numerous reasons people use blend modes. You can enhance a photo, you can correct a photo just by making a lighter image darker or a darker image lighter by using certain blend modes. In the design world, you can use them to create various effects to blend images together, both with graphics and photos to create very interesting effects. For instance, here I have this graphic that I created actually in Illustrator. It's a vector graphic I brought over to Photoshop because I wanted to be able to utilize textures and blend modes to make this a little bit more realistic. Now there are blend modes and such in Illustrator as well, but they're a lot more versatile here inside of Photoshop because of the utilization of the layers panel. So for instance, if I go and open up a graphic here, I've got this texture here. I've actually got two textures I want to blend with this graphic, and there's two relatively generic. It's got some interesting things going on here. This one's really just kind of rough. This one just really has a lot of aging and rust going on, and there's a lot of really interesting things happening here. So I'm going to use both of these in this example. So this first one, and in some cases when you're working with textures, you're going to find that you like a texture, not necessarily the color of the texture. And fortunately in Photoshop, you don't have to take one with the other. For instance, here, I'm not too fond of the color of this texture, but I really like the texture itself. So I'm going to take the color away. I'm simply going to press Shift-Command-U or Shift-Control-U if you're on Windows. And that basically takes the color information out, leaving only the texture. So now I'm going to go ahead and take this texture and drag and drop it into my working document. I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and drag it over, drops it in the center. And here in my layers panel, you can see the layers above it. Now the blend mode menu is located right here at the top, and the default setting is normal, which leaves the layer in its normal state. Now when you click on the menu here, you'll notice that you have a number of different blend modes that you can choose from. And they are set up in different categories. You notice you've got this set here and a set here, separated by these lines. Now these each have certain functions. This first section here darkens the image. It affects the darkness of the image. They all do it in very different ways. Notice if I just choose different ones, it interacts with that layer below in different ways. The next set affects the lightness of the image or the overall brightness. Notice it's only allowing the lighter areas of that layer to show through, and it's making the darker areas drop back. The next area, or the next section, actually affects the lightness and darkness of an image. So if I change it to overlay, you can see it is using the dark and light values to interact with that layer below and create an overall interesting effect. The next set actually creates inverted effects. You can do difference or exclusion, and it gets you some very interesting results there. And then the last set handles the color of your image. So it mixes the colors in this case. So what are the most common blend modes used? Well, you never know what blend modes you're going to want to use because every image is going to be different and they're going to blend differently. But I will tell you that the most commonly used blend modes are normal, which is the normal state, multiply, screen, overlay, soft light, and hard light. These are the ones I find myself personally using 90% of the time, but that doesn't mean the other ones are completely useless. They do have their uses, it just depends on when to use them. Now, here's a cool trick. When you have an image that you want to blend with the layer below and you're not sure what blend mode you want to use, simply make sure that you have your move tool selected here in the toolbar, and then hold down the Shift key and hit the plus sign. This will toggle through that list of blend modes, as you can see right here. And if you hit the minus key, it'll actually back up in the list, but it allows you to toggle through really fast and see which blend modes are going to work and which ones aren't going to work. And as I toggle through here, I noticed that in the overlay, or in the areas where it affects the lightness and darkness, I was liking the effect I get. Overlay looks pretty good. Soft light, not too bad. I think I'm actually going to stick with that one. And not to mention, in addition to the blend mode is blending this layer, you have control over the opacity of the layer. You can drop it down if you like a blend mode, like for instance, if you really liked overlay, but still was a little bit much, you could drop that opacity down a little bit. and lessen the effect even more so. But I think in this case, I'm going to like soft light. And another great thing about blend modes is you can blend multiple layers upon layers. Like for instance, this second texture I've got, I'm going to take this and go ahead and drag it over as is. I'm not going to take the color information out at all. And I'm going to change this one, and usually I'll start with a blend mode that I most commonly use and then just kind of work from there. But in this case, I'm going to go straight to overlay and see what it gives me. And that's really not bad. It's looking pretty good. It's using the color in the layer to blend with the existing image and giving me an overall interesting aged, weathered look on this sign here. Now, of course, if I could take that, remove that color information and see what kind of result I get, not too bad, but not as colorful as before. This looks a little bit more wore out. But again, through the use of blend modes, through two simple textures and two different blend modes, I'm able to get this really weathered, realistic look on this graphic, this vector graphic that I created in Illustrator. So what are some other instances you might use blend modes? Well, I have here another image. And this is something very common with photographers and such, is that they're taking images and applying textures to them just to give them an overall enhanced look, or a vintage look in a sense, almost kind of like the Instagram type things you see in these days. And in this case, we've got this old vintage film projector and such, and it's looking, it looks pretty good. It's a great shot, but I want to take it a step further perhaps and really just see what we can do with some textures and blend modes. So I'm just going to go in and actually I've already got a texture picked out, but I can't stress enough how much as a designer you want to keep a large library of textures. You can use these for almost anything. I have an enormous library that I've shot with my cameras, with my phones, various things like that you can take and apply to these images to create these really, really interesting kind of vintage looks about them. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and take this texture here. It seems a little large, so let's actually kind of size it down. It's already sized down. So I'm going to go ahead and, just like before, hold down the Shift key and drag and drop it over. And let's go ahead and minimize some of these windows here so we can actually see what we're doing. And I'm going to go ahead and just toggle through. I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and plus sign, toggle through the blend modes and see what I get. Some interesting things. Sometimes you're going to encounter things that are just straight hideous. Overlay really isn't too bad. I like that. Soft light's a little less intense. Not too bad. Hard light, not quite. So I think overlay is going to win this one. You can see why overlay is a very popular blend mode, in that it really helps give this kind of really interesting vintage look. And again, if it's too harsh, we can just drop that down with the opacity and make it more something like that. So you can see the power of blend modes just here in the sense of layers. And like I said, there are blend modes all over the program. When you're using the brush tool, for instance, here is a blend mode menu that can affect the pixels you lay down with your brush. You can mix them through the use of a blend mode. You can do layer styles. If I have an image here, and I open up my layer style panel, let's say I wanted to, I don't know, let's add a shape here. Fill it. And I wanted to add maybe an outer glow to this shape. So I can increase that size there and I can blend it. Let's get a color that's really going to blend so you can see the blending here. And notice the blend mode menu up here. It's by default set to screen, but let's try something like overlay. And you can see how it blends with the surrounding pixels to get an overall effect. So the same family of blend modes are all over the program, all pretty much functioning the same way, but how they're applied is what's different. Whether they're painted on, whether it's a layer style or a simple layer adjustment, you have numerous options when it comes to blend modes. And I can't, like I said, I can't think of a project I've used in Photoshop or worked on in Photoshop where I have not utilized blend modes in some way. Very powerful feature, definitely something you want to be familiar with.